But Ken Anderson, everybody, thanks for hopping on here today. How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
How's 2023 been treating you this year?
Yeah, better than 2020 was for sure.
That's a given.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
Cool.
I got my wrestling school. I'm I'm taking more bookings and stuff, so it's good so far.
Well, what's the fine line look like with that? Because I know you're obviously a dad, and then wrestling school occupies a lot of your time.
Mhm.
But you've also had those years when you were constantly on the road as well. So did your time on the road prepare you for the hectic nature of what being a father and running a wrestling school brings?
I think that's a great point because when you're on the road with like WWE or even Impact, you have a schedule, but it changes every day. It changes sometimes multiple times a day, and you just have to be able to like adapt, change on the fly. So, I definitely, because having kids is like that. It's just, especially when they're little, they're running around the house trying to commit suicide half the day, and yeah, so it definitely prepared me, I think. And
Did you have?
running my wrestling school, it's like having 65 other kids too. So I gotta look after them a little bit as much as I can.
So you're a dad home, and then you're essentially a dad in your second home.
Yeah,
You're home away from home.
yeah, definitely.
Did you have any places that you liked visiting in terms of wrestling at arena wise? Where like certain crowds might have piqued your interest more than others.
Um, I I don't know. I've always loved working in like the mid South, deep South, just that old school. You know, I remember when I first broke into the business, getting booked on a show down in Nashville for Burt Prentice, and there was they were telling us that there was a lady in the crowd who really still thought that this was real, and she would pack it like this big thick chain in her purse, and she would try to hit the wrestlers and things. Like that sort of. I like that sort of feeling, and
Yeah.
yeah. As far as like cities to visit, I have to say Melbourne, Australia, because I met my wife there. She's Australian, and Tokyo, Japan was by far one of the coolest cities that I've ever been to.
Yeah, those international crowds, they have like a certain flavor to them in terms of how they get up for events. Because I know WWE's been on like a recent run recently when all their last 3 pay-per-views were all overseas, and like the crowds just get up a certain way that the U.S. ones don't. I've come to realize. Why do you think that is?
Well, when I first broke into WWE, they had just started going to Italy. I guess they hadn't been there in a really long time, if ever. And we would run like, I think in 1 year we ran 10 different shows in 10 different cities. It was like two separate tours. And the first tour, I felt like, you see those videos of the Beatles coming off the airplane?
Yeah.
And like these people were rocking the bus as we were pulling into the arenas, and it was just nuts. Pandemonium, and it was because it was so new over there. And then, like I said, we went back. I'm not sure. I think the second tour was similar, but not quite as good. And then by the time we went the third year, it was like it was just normal. Yeah, but those crowds were insane. There was another crowd in the Philippines that our hotel was butted up to a mall, like a shopping mall, and fans couldn't come past a certain point, and they were just there was 3. I don't remember 3 floors where you could like look down over the railing, and it was just jammed with people.
Wow.
It was nuts.
Yeah, that is. I think that's probably a contributing factor, is because they don't get the shows as often. They're more like hungry and eager when they finally do get the shows, so they kind of want to leave that little bit of a lasting imprint, so they come back more often.
I've always noticed that, in England especially, or just in the UK in general, the fans are very, very, very savvy. Like, they get into it big time. And they're, here in the US, like, you go to a Packer game and it's dun, 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 go, Pack, go. And that's the extent of the creativity. And over there, like, the whole crowd will somebody will start a limerick, and then everybody follows it up, and it's just, they're crazy. They're crazy about soccer. They're crazy about wrestling.
That's where they actually just had their most recent pay-per-view was just in the UK for Money in the Bank, I think a week and a half ago. And they were coming up with like all these crazy chants, chant songs. Like, logic goes out the window overseas. Like, it's like if somebody's a face, maybe in the US, they become the heel overseas. It's crazy.
They decide.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about your wrestling school a little bit. What was the inception of it? When did you found it? And what was kind of the spark that prompted you to want to start it?
It was at the urgings of my wife at the time. My wife now, she was my girlfriend at the time. And my best friend in the wrestling business, which was Sean Navari. He and I opened the school in 2016. It was something that I always wanted to do. I think from the time that I broke in, as I was going down this path, it took me 6 years to get to WWE. And during that time, I did I wasted a lot of steps. It took me a long time to learn certain things that I teach my students on day one. And I wanted to make sure that if I could give back, that I would help people shave off some of that time. If they want to go to WWE or AEW or Impact or go to Japan, hopefully, like, we can make that happen and they don't have to go through as much as I went through. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was something that I always wanted to do. But even when I was at TNA, I'd been in business at that point for 15 years, 16 years. I didn't feel like I had enough. Like, I hadn't done enough yet. Like, who's gonna want to come learn from me? Like, I felt like I still had a lot that I needed to accomplish. But when we did open in 2016, I realized quickly just how much I actually loved it. And I've been doing it since 2016. I mean, we were closed for the pandemic for the better part of 2 years. But we've been open now for a year and a half since pandemic. And every 3 months, we run a new cycle of students. We've got 10 to 15 students every cycle. They're starting. And it's just, I love it. I love teaching people. I love, being able to, like, give them some tips of the trade that I had to sort of figure out on my own. I had to go out and make all my connections and everything. I didn't really know anybody when I broke into business.
So in a sense, it's sort of like giving them maybe the steps that you didn't or weren't afforded to in your come up, essentially.
Yeah, I was lucky in that I found a good wrestling school, but these guys are great and they're still really good friends of mine. But there was a lot that they just didn't know. These guys were just independent wrestlers in Wisconsin, and they had a couple years experience, and they were really good at teaching me the basics and sort of the psychology. They're really great with psychology. I'm so glad that I got with them. But there was still a lot of things that they just didn't know, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of go out and figure that out. Still to this day, I remember they told me on day one to flatten my feet out when I took a bump, like a body slam or something, like a suplex. But they didn't, like, pound it into my head. And to this day, I suffer because I would smash my heels into the mat for the last 20 years until I'm supposed to flatten my feet out. That's right. Just little stuff like that. So I harp on my students, like when they strike their heels when they're taking a bump, I'm like, you're going to walk like me. You're going to walk like me someday.
When you mentioned before about feeling like you hadn't accomplished enough, like did you feel did you mean in terms of like wrestling accolades or just internally with how you felt about yourself?
I don't know. I just felt like it probably was largely internal. It was just that like self-doubt that we all experience from time to time. But I honestly felt like if somebody's going to go to a wrestling school of like a former WWE Impact superstar, like at least the way that I wanted to do it, I wanted to make sure that I was able to give them as much as humanly possible. And I don't know, I just felt like I needed more experience. Yeah.
And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. The current WWE NXT Women's Champion came from your school. I just found that out. Found that out recently.
Also, another one of our students, one of our graduates, Gable Stevenson, just.
Oh yes, that's right.
Splash. There's a couple other students that are down there. Von Wagner. If you're familiar with him. He was our student. His name is escaping me. Javier Bernal. Sorry, Javier Bernal. He trained with us for a little bit, and I think there's one more that I'm missing. But like, and if you look over at AEW, Darius and Dante Martin, where like Darius was our first graduate. Julia Hart, she went to our school, so it's cool to see our students out there succeeding, and I feel like it's like we're doing something right.
Yeah, definitely. So it's like the full 9, right? Like aside of bumps, you obviously go through like promo skills and interviews and such.
Yeah. I start out at ground zero and try to teach them safety, and then basic rolls, bumps, moves, holds, spots, psychology as a big. I think I spend more time talking about like psychology and why we do something than anything else. I'm constantly stopping people, like, hang on a second, this is why you shouldn't do that. And I think sometimes it can maybe be frustrating, or maybe that's just me in my head, because I know that I would be. But in the end, it helps them out, because still, most of our students, when they train with us, when they go out and have their first match, when I kick them out of the nest finally, they go out and have their first match in front of a live crowd. I'm regularly approached by people that I can't believe that was his first match.
I was just talking about this with recent WWE people that I spoke to. The in-ring psychology and like what goes in a match. The casual person that might see it for the very first time, they might not look for these certain things, but like the hardcore audience and the people that are in the crowd, they're the people that you have to, they're the viewer. Like, you have to appease to them. So they want to feel like they're a part of the show. So something as simple as in between a move, like Hogan was so known for doing this, he'll like in between move sets, he'll look at the crowd and he'll point at the crowd. And that's like, part of the in-ring psychology. Things such as body movements, facial expressions, those are so like, they might seem minuscule to the casual person, but they're like very key components in professional wrestling.
Yeah, and when they're missing, you can't quite put your finger on it, but you can tell the difference between like those guys they're better than those guys. Even though these people in the second match might be super athletic, they might look like $1 million, but if they're missing the psychology, the little aspects, the little nuance, it shows. And again, you can't put your finger on it, but it's there.
So what about when you were growing up? Did you have a certain career path in mind, and wrestling kind of led you to that, or what was there? What was your career path basically in terms of what led you to wrestling?
It's kind of funny because like when I was a little kid, from the time that I was about 5 years old until I was in high school, I just wanted to act. I wanted to be an actor. It's funny because like I never went to school, so I acted. I did some plays and stuff like that in high school. I was in forensics, did play acting. I went to state 3 years in a row. So I only did it sophomore through senior year. Got a gold medal in state forensics and play acting. And then I sort of, I don't know, I want to say I gave up, but I just like, I'm going to get a job. I got a decent paying job that had great benefits. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I was a nuclear security officer. So I was an armed guard at a nuclear power plant. And I remember we would sit in these little boxes. You'd sit in a box for an hour, and then somebody would come and you would rotate to another box, and you'd sit there for an hour. And you just, and I just remember like being completely miserable in a sense. Like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I had tried my hand at some acting. I did a couple classes at a local community college. And I remember I just didn't like the atmosphere. Or what, it wasn't for me at the time. That sort of thespian attitude that some people have. But I kind of gave that up for a while. But I remember I found wrestling when I was working at that job. I'd never watched wrestling as a kid. I started watching wrestling when I was 21, I think. 21 or 22. And then I just loved it. I was in love, like head over heels. That's all I would talk about. That's all I would think about. I couldn't wait. And at the time, it was only Monday Night Raw. So like we would have watch parties. And I was at a party one day, and somebody said, like, you can go to school to do that. There's like wrestling schools. My buddy's going to one, and my mind was blown. And I scurried home, and I got on the computer. It was like AOL.com. There was no Google at the time. And I looked up wrestling schools. And I remember thinking, there's not going to be I was living in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, which is near Green Bay. And I remember thinking, like, there aren't going to be any wrestling schools around here. I'm going to have to go to like LA or Chicago. So I started looking up wrestling schools in Chicago, which is about 3.5 hour drive. And I remember thinking, this was way before, I didn't know anything about the business. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, I work every other weekend at this job. And on those opposite weekends, I'll drive down to Chicago. I'll sleep in my car if I have to, and I'll go to wrestling school. And then I reached out to a Chicago promoter who had a wrestling school, and then the next day I got a phone call from a guy in Green Bay who he had just gotten my number from the original guy, and he said, "Hey, I'm opening up a school. You'd be my first." I don't think he said this to me at the time, but I ended up being his first student. I went in, had a little 2-hour tryout where they showed me how to run the ropes, take a bump. And then I honestly, this ring was a 16 by 16 low rider ring. It only sat about like 2 feet off the ground. It was like bumping on my kitchen floor or my dining room floor here. Just hard. It was railroad ties, and there was sheets of plywood over the top of that, and about a 1/4 inch of carpet padding in the canvas. The ropes were all saggy and floppy. There was blood stains and splotches all over the mat, and I was like, "This is awesome!" Like I just, the minute I stepped in that ring, I thought, like, I'm home. This is what I want to do. And then I committed as much time as I could to learning. And at the time, the school was only running like every Sunday, so I only trained for a couple hours once a week. But then the rest of the time, my trainer, he would come down he would drive down from Green Bay and sleep on my couch, and he would bring this giant box of tapes. Like VHS tapes were the thing back then. There's a big tape trade going on, and he would just plug VHS tape after VHS tape in and point out like the psychology. This is why they're doing this, and it was just like an amazing education. So that was a long way to tell you that.
I really enjoyed the whole long version of that because that was really interesting. So, was it a buddy that showed you it for the first time, or did you watch it while you were possibly at work, or just like see it on in the background and then like kept paying more attention to it?
It was a buddy who I had known for several years that he was a big wrestling fan. There was like a subgroup in our bigger group that all loved wrestling, and I used to give him a hard time about it all the time. Like, you guys, what are you doing? Like, why would you watch that crap? And he would just laugh and say, like, it's just soap opera, man. Like, it just, you should watch sometime. And I was like, I'll never watch it. No way. And then one night, it was just the two of us at his house, and he's like, Raw is on, and you're watching it tonight. I was like, I'm not fucking watching that. Sorry, can I swear on here?
Yeah, good.
I said, I'm not watching that. And he was like, there's this guy who is like white hot right now. He was just starting out, and like, you just watch it just for him. And I was watching, and I remember hearing the glass break and seeing this bald-headed son of a bitch drive out to the ring in a pickup truck with a six-pack of beer on his lap. And I came from a really small town, blue-collar town, and it was just that instant sort of connection. And just the way he carried himself, he was different than the other wrestlers that I had seen in the past. I felt like there were a lot of wrestlers who were sort of like over the top, but he was legit. Like, you believed him, and he believed it. And I fell in love with that particular character. So then I started watching. My roommates at the time watched too. So then I started watching with them. I just want to see what Austin does. And then, Undertaker's kind of cool too, and Kane. And then before long, I was sucked in, and I realized, like, I've been missing out on this. My friend was right, So then, like I said, it was just getting white hot. This was 1997? 97, right?
Yeah.
That was what Austin had. 97, that's insane. But that was the first time that I really like sat down and watched wrestling. And then I started in 1999, and I took my first bump in 99.
Wow. So were you a fan when the Montreal Screwjob occurred?
No, I came in just after that.
Ah, okay. So you just missed it then, because I think that was the same year. So you must have came later that year. Wow.
And the funny thing is, like, I knew nothing about the business. I didn't know. I would turn over to WCW, and for whatever reason, it just didn't appeal to me. I didn't like it. There were these larger-than-life characters over on WWF at the time. Just the way that their presentation was different, and I preferred that. But yeah, it was just nuts, and I just, at the time, wrestling was so hot. I remember, like, the wrestlers were on the cover of, they did TV Guide, and there was like 4 separate issues that you could collect. It was like Mankind, Jericho, The Rock, and Austin. And Austin was doing the Got Milk ads.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just becoming so mainstream that pretty much all the guys that I worked with watched it too. So when I would go in for my shift, we'd have to go into this little room, and they would tell you, like, particulars. They call them pass-ons, and they would pass on information from the earlier shift. And there was usually a couple minutes before we got started, and we'd all like, so did you see Monday night? Did you see what happened? And then, and then sitting in these boxes, we were like a bunch of washwomen. Like, we would call each other because there was nothing else to do and talk about wrestling. And then you get done talking to this guy, and then
talk to the next one.
So it was literally when I remember when I first started when I first started going to wrestling school. You have those like nobody was ever like super negative, but there were a couple people that'd be like, "Hey man, when are you gonna wrestle The Rock? When are you gonna wrestle Hogan?" Like, right? Kind of like you're never gonna do that. That's ridiculous. And I don't know, when I first broke in and I knew that there was an opportunity to possibly break in, like, there were people that had tryouts with WWE or WWF at the time, and when I found that out, I just like internally I said like this is what I want to do. But I didn't necessarily go around and like toot my horn to the world, but internally I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it to WWF one day.
Was it something that you wanted to keep kind of close to your vest, in the sense of if it didn't work out, the people around you wouldn't have that like satisfaction of knowing that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good attitude to have about a lot of things. I've always kind of been that way, where like I won't necessarily run around and spout off about what I'm thinking about doing, because like if you fail, then like, oh, you've been talking all this trash for so long. Like, what happened to that? So, but like I said, internally, I was like, I knew that I was going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And when you were crafting your gimmick and character, were there any bits of pieces of Steve Austin that you looked to put into your own little spin and emulate, or did you have any other possible inspirations for the Mr. Kennedy gimmick?
It was never, if it was never intentional. Like I never tried to directly rip off. And that was one of the things that my trainers were very big on. Like, you don't rip other people's stuff off. You gotta come up with your own stuff. However, every move in wrestling everybody's done it,
Yeah.
It's just like you have to figure out how to put your little spin on it. And then I was sort of struggling with what character am I going to be, and I didn't want to be like a gimmick. That just didn't appeal to me. I didn't know what I want to do. The Rock was also a big, like, I loved listening to his promos. Just the way that he would captivate an audience and have the audience literally eating out of the palm of his hand. But I remember I had broken up with this girl. This was 3 or 4 months. No, actually, it was 3 or 4 months after I had started actually having matches. And I broke up with this girl. And I found out that a really good friend of mine had been spending time with her. And I called him to talk about it. And my wrestling trainer and a bunch of other buddies of mine were in the room with me, and I was just cutting a promo on this guy. And these guys are all laughing, rolling around on the floor at some of the stuff that I was saying, the way that I was saying it. And when I hung up the phone, dude, if you ever wonder like what your character needs to be, it's that. Just think back to this time. And so that really helped me sort of, navigate, figure out exactly what direction I was going to go. It was just, and it ultimately, I know this sounds cliche, but it was me with volume turned up.
Okay, wow. So that phone call, was that like with the intention, like, hey, look, I'm going to go cut a promo on him, or did that call just happen to take place in the same room as those people?
Yeah, it wasn't like, no, I didn't intend to. I was like, I'm going to call this guy up and see, like, hey, man, so I heard through the grapevine that he's been spending some time with Tammy, and then just the way that progressed. I wasn't like saying that I was going to kick his ass or anything like that. It wasn't anything. It was no. I don't believe that I was threatening him in any way, but like I let him know, And, like I said, that was, okay, I know where I want to go with my character when I cut promos and stuff like that. So cutting promos was actually fairly easy. And it was something that I was given an opportunity to do fairly often early on in my career, which I'm really thankful for, because without that, we won't be sitting here having this discussion.
Yeah. Did you go through OVW, like the usual route in which wrestlers go?
Yep, I did. When I got signed, kind of a funny story. When I got signed, I was sort of at the end of my rope. Like, it had been 5.5, 6 years. I'm humping. I'm broke. I'm bankrupt. I didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, but I always made sure that I had new wrestling gear, and I was, because like I sort of viewed it as my college. Because some people go into debt. They want to be a doctor. They go to college and they go into debt, $250,000. I sort of looked at it like, I'm going to make it to WWF. I'm sorry, where was I going with that?
OVW.
OVW, yeah. So Davari called me. Davari had been hired for about 6 months prior to me getting the call. And he said, hey, they just hired like 8 guys from OVW that were in the amateur class. You should be getting a call soon, because Tommy and Paul Heyman and Arn Anderson had all said they were going to throw their name in the hat for me. And, I didn't take them at their word, but I sort of like, I really hope that's true. And so I waited all weekend. I remember I did this match where I was in a cage match. I was on top. I got up on top of this wobbly cage on an independent show in Green Bay, Wisconsin, with like maybe 110 people in the audience, and I did a swanton off the top of this cage. Like, I should have died. And then that was on a Saturday. Sunday, no call. Monday, no call. Tuesday, no call. And then Wednesday was always the day that I would call Dreamer. He was in charge of bringing in extras and hiring new guys, new talent. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to call him. So I called him on my break. And normally when I would call him, I would say like, hey, Tommy, this is Ken Anderson from Green Bay. And he would go, hello, Ken Anderson from Green Bay. What can I do for you? This super monotone voice. And I remember thinking, like, this guy hates my guts. But that's just the way Tommy is. That's his delivery for anything. Hey, I won $10 million. But he would always say, like, if he had anything else going on at the time, he would say, I need to call you back. Is this a good number to reach you at? Yes. And then he would never call me back. Right? So, and nothing intentional. It's just the way that it is in that line of work. But he said, hang on a second. I need to talk to you. And I was like, this is new. And I heard some rustling of papers. And he's like, I've been trying to get a hold of you for the last few days, but your number has been disconnected. And I was like, talking into my cell phone. Like, no, my number is not disconnected. And he goes, oh, is your number blah, 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 blah? Said, no. He goes, oh, I've been calling the wrong number. Well, I'm glad you called me. And it turns out that he was literally like 15 minutes or maybe it was a little bit longer than that, but very soon after he was going to go on, he was going to assume that he just couldn't get in touch with me and he was going to go on to the next person on his list.
Wow.
And he said, I've been calling you to tell you that I got you a job. And, again, he's this monotone delivery. And I'm exploding inside. And I want to do backflips. And he's like, we kind of talked. At the time, it was either OVW or they were just opening Deep South Wrestling in Atlanta, Georgia. But it hadn't opened yet. So he's like, I don't know if we're going to have you go to Atlanta or OVW. I'll let you know. I'll get back to you. And then he's like, is there anything else you want to say to me? And I was like, Tommy, I laid out this, man, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to bust my ass and blah, 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 this and that. And he goes, okay, you don't have to go getting all lame on me. And just completely kicked the wind out of my sails. And we laughed about it today. But then I remember Davari messaged me and he was like, don't go to Deep South. Go to OVW. You want to go to OVW. That's where they're already, OVW is established already. Deep South might not be around for very long. And it turns out, it wasn't. So he steered me right in that. He told me, like, you want to go to OVW. So I actually went and I got an apartment. I just booked an apartment. Like, I quit my job and I rented out an apartment over the phone. I didn't even walk through it or anything like that. Sent in my money. And then I actually loaded up a truck, moved down there. And then my idea was, after I got moved in, I was going to call Tommy and just say, hey, I'm here. So that's what I did. And he was like, oh, are you down there looking for an apartment? And I go, no, I'm here. Actually, rewind a little bit. He did at some point say, I think Davari talked to him and sweet talked to him and said, send him to OVW. So when he told me that, then that's when I got an apartment. And I called him on a Tuesday night. And then I said, Tommy, I'm here in Louisville. And he's like, oh, are you down there looking for an apartment? And I said, no, I'm moved in. I'm here. And he was like, you're there? Because he still hadn't given me a start date. And he was like, well, if that's the case, then you can go to TV is tomorrow. We're business casual. Go knock on the back door, introduce yourself, and go on in.
Wow. So were you Mr. Were you Mr. Kennedy in OVW?
I was no, I was Mr. Anderson. That was my real name.
Mr. Anderson. So what went into the decision process then on the main roster to switch the name to Kennedy? Was that a Vince call?
Yeah, it was a Vince call. I remember I debuted on Velocity against Funaki. I think I had 2 weeks of dark matches on still on Velocity, just squashing local guys, which is crazy because I was still kind of a local guy. Nobody knew who I was, but I went from every time that I did a lot of enhancement matches for WWE, and Arn Anderson was regularly my producer, and he would regularly say, "Hey kid, nothing against you, but this is not about you tonight. This is about him." And he would point to, Rodney Mack or 3 Minute Warning or whoever it was, and then it was interesting because now Arn was having that same discussion. He was just having it on my behalf with this other local guy. So it's kind of crazy. But third or fourth week, when I got the TV, Johnny came up to me, Johnny Ace, and he said, hey, they want you to change your name. And I immediately bristled because I really wanted to keep my real name. But so I sort of I tried fighting it. I remember I called Paul Heyman and I said, hey, they want me to change my name. I'm going to try to talk him out of it, but let's come up with can you help me come up with a name? And I was Kamikaze Ken when I first started out in wrestling, and I had these this logo, these backwards K's.
Yeah. And
I sort of wanted to keep that if I could. So I was like, something with K, alliteration of some sort, and then he just kept throwing all these names, and so it was funny because it was like a true rap session where we were just throwing out stupid stuff. Something finally stuck. I remember he was like, you need to pick something that is near and dear to Vince's heart, something that he can relate to. And he's like, his dog's name is Ruckus. Kenny Ruckus. And I was like, yeah. And then there was another dog that was, whatever that dog name was. And then he goes, Kennedy. Kennedy is Vince's middle name. If he gives you Kennedy, he loves you. And then, so when I went into that room, So Johnny had said, come up with a name. Vince wants to meet with you in like an hour or so. And I went into this room, and it was Vince, Johnny Ace, Stephanie, Kevin Dunn, and me, which is just a crazy, like, how I got from just the local guy that was doing a stupid swanton off the top of a cage, not too far before that, to I'm sitting in this room with these people, and we're discussing, like, I'm debuting kind of thing. And I remember Vince said, like, so you come up with a name? I was like, I gotta say, I really like Ken Anderson. I like Mr. Anderson. He's like, he's like, I don't want people thinking that you're related to our bully team. Like, I don't want them to think that nepotism had anything to do with this or whatever. I sort of think that was his way of letting me down easy.
Yeah.
Because he just didn't know if I was going to be the drizzling shits or not. So he was like, nope, we're changing your name. And I was like, God. And then I remember he's like, do you have any catchphrases? And I said, yeah, nice guys finish last. Thank God I'm an asshole. And he was like, ooh, I like it, but you can't use that. Can't do it. And I was like, no. And then I remember Johnny Ace at the time said, hey, maybe, like, what if your name was Adam Hole? So then you could say, nice guys finish last. Thank God I'm an a-hole. And Vince he looked at me and he goes, what do you think about that? And that was like a test. I knew it was a test. And I said, that's a clever name. I think it's funny, but it feels like very gimmicky and like something that somebody who would only be here for like a few months. And I plan on being here for a really long time. He was like, all right. And then when I said Kennedy, he's like, well, there's never been a Kennedy before. I like it. Do you like it? I was like, I like Anderson, but you can call me Dickhead if you really want to. And he's like, all right. And he looked at Kevin Dunn and he said, make sure he's got Kennedy on the Titantron tonight when he goes up. So that was it. And then I went down to, because I was still doing double duty. I was on the road for SmackDown, and then I would fly down to Louisville and do OVW TV on Wednesday nights. And they, I remember Paul Heyman was writing TV for OVW at the time, and he said, like, just go out there and tell him that you changed your name. Because, like, Vince gave you his middle name, so I just got this promo, and I was Kennedy from that.
Yeah, and I even heard that was supposed to, like, the whole Kennedy correlation was supposed to lead to a storyline with you being his illegitimate son. Did you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't a plan that we had going into it or anything. I never really had any solid, set in stone plans. It was more just, they kept putting me in matches with high profile players, and they were competitive matches, and sometimes I would win. But no, like, the real storylines, I remember Stephanie was the one that pulled me aside. She's like, Vince has something, and he's really excited to talk to you about it. So, and then she ushered me into his room, and he said, like, hey, it's gonna turn out that I'm gonna be told that I have an illegitimate son, and we're gonna have a big investigation that's gonna take place over the course of several weeks, and then you're gonna be my illegitimate son. So then we set up, weeks of little stuff. And I remember, like, one of the funnier ones was we had an interaction where he's looking to figure out who this is. It's somebody in the company. It's a wrestler, and it was a male. And we bumped into each other backstage at some point. We had a little interaction, and then, like, I walked off, and I did the Vince walk as I walked off. So that was kind of a funnier interaction that we had, and then I got in trouble, and then that came to a screeching halt. So
that was at the end of your run, or was that during?
No, that was during. Yeah, that was. I don't remember. I don't remember if it was post Money in the Bank, right? I had the briefcase, and that was the one sort of long-term storyline that they planned out. At that point, was I had said that I was going to cash in my briefcase at WrestleMania the following year, and as far as I know, that was we were going to stick to that plan. But then Undertaker got injured, and they pulled me into a room and said, "Hey, we were going to have you wait till WrestleMania, but Taker's hurt. He needs surgery. So on Tuesday, SmackDown, here's what we're going to do. Taker's going to be in a cage match with Mark Henry, and he's just going to barely squeak out of that one. And then somebody was going to do a run-in and beat him up a little more, and then I was going to come out and cash in the briefcase. And I remember I went home, and I tried to be like low-key about it. I tried never to get excited about things until I'm actually like it's actually happening. Because like I said, things happen, things change all the time in wrestling. And so I went home, talked to my ex-wife about it, and then the next show was the following Saturday in Poughkeepsie. We had a double shot in the first show. I just took a bump. Like Batista gave me a clothesline. That was it. And when I hit the mat, I felt something pop in my triceps, rolled out to the floor, and it was immediately starting to swell up. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it started changing colors right away too, which is, usually bruises take days to set in. It started changing color right away, and I remember that is not good. And I just please don't let it be a tear. Don't let it be a tear. And I went. Hornswoggle drove me to the emergency room that night in Erie, Pennsylvania, and got an MRI. And they just said, go back to your hotel room and just wait. We'll call you with the results. And Stephanie called me in the room the next day, and she's like, "Ken, you tore your triceps off the bone, and you're going to have surgery, and you're going to be out for 8 or 9 months. But we still need to get that title off of Taker, though. So we're going to have you, the jet is going to come pick you up, fly you to Penn State, and then Edge is going to challenge you for the briefcase. Edge is going to want to do what you were supposed to do." And I was like, okay, it's business, it's not like it's when I get back, it sucks. I was excited to do this, but I'll be back. And then so I went and I dropped the briefcase to Edge, and then the next day I flew to Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm sitting on Dr. James Andrews' table, and he's just feeling my triceps, and he's like, "That's not a tear." And I was like, "Excuse me?" "Pretty sure that's not a tear. I don't feel a tear in there at all." And he couldn't find my MRI, so I had to do another MRI, and it was just a large hematoma. It was like a large bruise, a bunch of blood vessels popped, and so he said, "You'll be out for maybe 4 or 5 weeks." So that was kind of a crazy set of circumstances.
So that was really what you feel kind of plagued you in a sense, in terms of your momentum and where your trajectory of your push was going.
I mean, I got injured a few times, but the first time I was drop kicked off the apron, and I landed on I tore my lat, and then I had that injury, which was major. It was every time I would start to get some momentum, something would happen, and it was just, and the thing was, at the time I wasn't doing myself any favors. I went in with this amazing attitude, where a year after I started, people saying, "Is it everything that you thought it would be?" And I was like, "Yes, and more. This, I love it here. This is my dream job." And then I don't know, it started to become just another job. It's really weird, and it's crazy just saying those words and looking back, but just the way that it was, and I didn't like the only person that I can blame for that is me. Like I can't blame that on anybody, pulling the rug out from underneath me or burying me, or it was me. I would have fired me too at that time.
Did it feel like the fun of it got sucked out for you by the end? Because I think I saw somewhere you said that you kind of phoned it in towards the end of your run.
Well, when I say that, I never phoned it in the ring. I felt, right? Like I've never ever just gone out there and like, I'm going to take it easy tonight. It's always been like, when I'm in the ring, I'm going to go. It was just, there were months where I didn't even work out. Like I didn't go to the gym. Here's my job is to maintain my physique. It says in the contract that if if your physique starts to change, that they can fire you. I mean, they can fire you literally for anything, but I don't know. I felt like, they won't fire me. I'm good. I got this. And I wasn't contributing at all. I wasn't coming up with ideas. I wasn't even thinking. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but that whole Money in the Bank thing, though, like it was such a crazy snowball effect of what happened, because that moment in particular, I mean, to win a match like that, I mean, to win Money in the Bank at all, especially that early on with how big of an event it was, in the magnitude that comes with that, because at that time it's essentially like whoever wins this match is almost essentially like stamped as like a world champ. Like it was almost guaranteed.
That was really the deal at the time.
Yeah. Because you were the third guy, I believe, to win. It was Edge and RVD were the first two, and they won. So, and they went from essentially like lower tier main eventers to then like main eventers because of that. So it seemed like with you winning that match, that was almost like the formal stamp of approval. I know you had worked with like Undertaker and Batista right along up to that point, though, so you did have like some main event level experience. But winning that match, especially with taking into consideration the amount of Hall of Famers that were in that match, or future Hall of Famers for that matter, was quite a big deal. Is that still one of the moment rather that you look at in terms of your wrestling career as like the pinnacle?
Definitely, just that feeling of being on top of that ladder, knowing like this is WrestleMania, like. But at the time, I hadn't. I was still excited about it. I hadn't gotten to that point. Like I remember wrestling Ric Flair on a pay-per-view, and it was like I'm just wrestling a local. It was like the same level of excitement that I would have to wrestle a local guy today. It was weird. It's just nuts. But yeah, that standing on top of that ladder, the interaction that I had with CM Punk at the top of that ladder, like we had a little conversation back and forth while we were trading punches, which was kind of funny. We had been on, it was my second show, and I believe his first show we were on the card together, and I wrestled on that particular night. I wrestled as, he didn't even call me by my wrestling name that I picked. He called me Two Rivers Jack as like a joke. He gave me no music, and I came out and I wrestled a fake Golga. Remember Golga from the Oddities?
Yeah.
It was just a big, heavy set guy that wore the mask and did Golga's stuff. And I wrestled that guy. I got no offense. Actually, I take that back. I threw a drop kick, and he no-sold it. Like, he just or something. And he beat me. And then Punk had a similar experience his first match. And the thing was, is like that's the way it I believe that's the way it should be. I was never mad about it. I never had a pissy attitude about it. It just was what it was. And then we're up at the top of the ladder, and it's the last spot before I'm going to knock him off and retrieve the briefcase. And he just said something like, "Man, this is kind of a far cry from Whitewater, Wisconsin. What do you think?" Yep. And that, and then my other kind of highlight as far as WWE goes was definitely the little interaction I had with Hornswoggle.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew Dylan. I sort of trained, like he credits me with training him, even though I didn't realize that I was training him at the time. It wasn't like a proper, I guess I would just work with him before shows and teach him some stuff. What little I knew at the time.
Yeah.
And the tribute to the troops was really excited to do that, happy to do that. And then Impact, my match with Kurt Angle in the cage at Laknight was probably my favorite match that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah. So like when the release came, did you feel like were you almost numb at that point? Did it set in? Because like this is something you had talked about or wanted to or had aspirations of doing for a while, and then for it to kind of abruptly come to an end. That had to have been sort of almost weird for you, right? To come all that way, accomplish, and then have like an abrupt sort of conclusion.
So it's funny because like the guy that got me into loving the business became my friend when I was working for WWE. And I used to talk to Steve like on a regular basis, Steve Austin. And remember he called me up one day. I was probably my last year at the company, and I wasn't doing well. I had a ton of heat backstage with certain people, not with everybody. Like I always got on with most everybody, but like there was a couple people that I just didn't get on with. And I remember he called me up and he was like, "Kid, get the fuck out of there." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Quit. Go to TNA. Go to Japan. Get away from the company for a while. Get the stink off you. Like you got this guy. I hate your guts. This guy hates your guts. This guy I hate your guts." And I remember like fucking I got off the phone with him and I curled up into a ball like a baby and I fucking cried. Like I openly wept. And it was just like, how has it come to this, Like, but and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to walk away from that salary at the time. And I just never did it. But I never made any changes either in my behavior or the way that I was approaching the business. And then when I got that phone call, it was like getting kicked in the balls. It really was. I was so hurt and upset. And then about eight hours after I got off the phone with Johnny, I remember Johnny called me and he's like, "Hey Kenny, what are you doing?" I just nothing. I'm just chilling. He goes, "Kenny, I got bad news." That was his exact words. "I got bad news, Kenny." I went, "No way. Really?" And he was like, "Yep, sorry." I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "They just decided creative doesn't have anything for you." And they've decided not to go with the Ken Kennedy character anymore, which is like a pat answer he gives to a lot of people. But and I just like they weren't. He said they weren't happy with the way things went on Monday, and sorry, you got a 90-day no compete, and I'll send you over the paperwork and the details and blah blah blah. I was all right. That was the last time I talked to Johnny, and like I said, it felt like I got kicked in the nuts and the stomach. And 8 hours after, it was like this giant weight had been lifted off my chest. So I'm gonna be okay. This is a good thing. No, and it completely turned my attitude around. And I should say it turned my attitude around. Like I'm gonna make it through this. I'm gonna be okay. But I was bitter. I was really bitter for a long time about just the way things sort of ended there. And again, I was bitter at the wrong person. I should have been bitter at the man in the mirror, ultimately. But I was blaming it on other people and other circumstances. And they didn't do this, and they didn't do that. And it's like, like let's say, the stories out there that people buried me in the back. Well, if that might be true, But had I busted my ass and just worked hard from the moment that I got there until it, those people wouldn't have had anything to say. Like, they wouldn't have been able to bury me, or they would have tried to bury, and Vince would have went, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Right? But I gave him a reason to. Well, and I think Vince, at the end of the day, was just tired of hearing my name in negative fashion, and he just said, like, no. Well,
Did you ever hold hope out that eventually the paths would cross again to where they would approach you for possible comeback or anything like that?
No. Not until very recently did I even entertain the possibility of that happening. I didn't want to. I was like convinced. So I convinced myself that it wasn't me. And I didn't. I was so bitter that I didn't want to go, and I didn't let it like affect every moment or every day of my life. It was just I had a bad attitude about it, and then I remember like one time I was at Impact, and I was asked to go out and cut this promo and sort of bury the WWE, and I didn't really want to do it. I wasn't worried about blowing up the bridge, but I just felt like it's a bad look. I look like, I'm just whining. That's never a good look. Even when somebody is completely right, when you hear them whine, it's like nobody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't want to do it. And I went out there and I cut. Like, at the time, Impact gave me a lot of freedom with what I could say on the mic. They would give me, here's some bullet points. You say it in your words. And that's sort of the way that they presented this to me. But there was some very key elements that they wanted me to touch on, and I didn't touch on the promo. I went out there and I just sort of I played it cool. Some would say I played it, in the political game, but honestly, that wasn't my intention at the time. It was simply I just didn't want to look like a whiner or cry baby. Mm-hmm. And I can remember I came back through the curtain, and Vince Russo was writing the TV at the time, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Bro, I really, really needed you to go out there and do that, and he convinced me, he talked me into it. It took some convincing, but he's like, I need you to go back out there and do it again. Will you do it? And I was like, sure. And to this day, it's one of the most cringy things that I've ever done. When I look back on it, it's rough. Just from where I sit.
Yeah. Right, because you don't want to come across like someone who has sour grapes or anything like that. Yeah.
And I think, at least when I look at it, that's what I see. I just see this guy's got a fucking bad attitude, and he's blaming everybody else. It's the typical. It's just typical. It's and you're just another number. You're one of those guys.
Yeah.
That had a good run at WWE and was the flavor of the month, and then something got fucked up and out the door. So yeah, I'm and I don't hold anything against Vince. It's he was doing what needed to be done. Yeah, I love Vince Russo, but I regret him being able to talk me into doing that. Mm-hmm. And I remember too, I got a text message from somebody in the company in WWE, the night that it aired, and they were like, really liked your promo.
There's a certain individual actually that you worked with in NWA. At the time, he went by Eli Drake, but now in WWE he goes by Laknight. I've actually seen a lot of parallels between your run in WWE and kind of what he's going through right now, and I've seen certain people make that comparison. What was maybe your recollections of Eli Drake at the time and working with him, and do you see the parallels between the two characters, LA Knight and Mr. Kennedy?
I honestly thought when I was working with him in NWA, I still had that I wasn't myself. I still had I just wasn't passionate about the business, and he was passionate. He was a man on a mission. he was, counting his macros backstage. I'd see him I remember one time my wife, we were down there. They would put us in a bed and breakfast, or not a bed and breakfast. Where you rent the? There's an app where you can rent somebody's house or whatever, right?
An Airbnb. Is that
Airbnb.
what yeah.
Airbnb, and there was a bunch of us, and my wife went out and got a bunch of protein, like steak, chicken and stuff, and she cooked up. She brought it for all the people that were staying in our house. And remember Laknight, she offered him some chicken breasts, and he counted out, he weighed it, he was measuring, he was doing math in his head, how many macros that would be. He was serious, and he put so much effort into everything that he did. I remember thinking he's definitely he was, at the time, in my opinion, the best person on the mic in the business.
In just pro wrestling in general?
A lot of wrestling. I didn't watch a whole lot of WWE, but from what I knew, I couldn't think of anybody who could go toe to toe with him. His promos were thoughtful, they were engaging, they were funny, they were everything that they needed to be. And so it's no surprise to me that he's having the success that he has. It's really cool to see. And hearing, I just heard an interview with him. Chris Van Vliet interviewed him recently and was talking about that moment that he had where it changed for him, or he realized something's changing. So when he said that, I remember that feeling. I remember standing backstage while people were filing into the building. And I'm talking to Dave Lagana, and Dave was the head writer of SmackDown at the time. He was he said, we just got to work on getting you over. And, people just don't know who you are. And I remember, at the same time he was saying this, have you ever been to a live event?
Yeah.
Right? When people start filtering in, what do you hear? Woo! 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 And I was hearing, woo, Kennedy, woo, Kennedy. And that's when I was I think this is working. I didn't say that to Dave, but it was just funny. I wanted to say, are you hearing what I hear? But he was right in the sense that, just because they've seen you on TV, and we have in the business what's called a star pop, where fans, it's not a super over where they're completely invested in your character, and it's just more hey, that's the guy that we watch on TV, and he says his name and it's memorable or whatever, but it wasn't I was over. In fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I look at the two of you two, not only on screen, but journey-wise speaking too. You guys have almost had similar journeys with wanting to get into professional wrestling, because I know he's talked too recently about how there's been times where he's been broke and had to get evicted and was living in his car just to pursue his dream of wanting to be a professional wrestler. And he was also doing numerous acting things just to pay bills, and then constantly making this 20-year climb just to get into the business. And then if you look at on-screen speaking, the whole Kennedy thing, and then now with him is the yeah chant. So there's so distinct similarities between you two. And there's brainstorming off my head now speaking, if there was ever an opportunity, let's just say for a Royal Rumble spot where you and him to have sort of this moment in the ring where he can go yeah, and then you say Kennedy, would that be ever something that you'd be open to?
Yeah, bitch it. Go ahead and bitch it.
Because I think if you wanna make a moment, that's just
I would be open to something like that.
That'd be super cool.
For years, I wouldn't even entertain it. I didn't want to do it, but no, I don't know. My passion for the business has been reinvigorated.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And thank you again so much for your time today. This was a ton of fun chatting, and I'm glad to see you doing so good with all the things you got going on right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I just want to say, I think you got a good thing going here. You know, I get requests from time to time that, and not everybody. I remember I clicked on the link you sent me of the interview with you and Melina. I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. So
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Good questioning. It's good talk.
Right.
I believe that I said stuff to you that I've never told anybody else, by the way.
Oh, wow. I'm flattered.
Yeah. No, that thing about me curling up into a ball on the couch, I don't know that I've ever told anybody, like outside of my wife and a couple of my close friends. So.
Oh, wow. I'm flattered to hear that. I'm more than appreciative. So thanks so much for that and all your kind words. All right.
Thanks, man.
Have a great rest of your day. And thanks again. All right.
Hey, are you done? Did you